Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Korean-style cream cheese garlic bread. That's right, I'm going to show you my more savory, less sweet take on this somewhat strange, but absolutely addictive viral recipe sensation. And if something that's basically a cross between a cheese Danish and garlic bread does not sound great, you've probably not had one of these, because it is way beyond great. And by turning up the savoriness and turning down the sweetness, I think that's even more true. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making some rolls, which is optional since you can use store-bought. But as we proceed, I'm going to explain the advantages of doing it yourself. But anyway, what we'll do is combine some warm water with some dry active yeast, plus a little bit of sugar, and 1 cup of our all-purpose flour. And what we'll do after whisking that together is let it sit for 30 minutes to give our yeast a little head start. And if everything goes according to plan, you should see a lot of bubbles forming on the top. And then what we'll do after 30 minutes is go ahead and add the rest of our flour and our salt, as well as grab a dough hook and head to the stand mixer, where we're going to mix this for about 5 minutes or so, or until we formed a very smooth, fairly elastic, somewhat tacky, but not sticky dough. And as usual, if it seems too soft and sticky, add a little more flour. Right, we definitely want something that pulls cleanly off the sides of the bowl. And I'm going to give you a nice close look at what I ended up with as soon as I managed to remove this bowl from the mixer. So this is pretty much what we're going for. And yes, it is relatively stiff compared to a lot of the softer, stickier doughs we work with. And as you can see, I didn't even need to dust on any flour to give this a quick knead. But if you have to, go for it. That is just you baking. And then what we'll do is transfer our dough back into the bowl, which I've lightly greased, and we will cover it. And we will let it rise for about 2 hours or until it doubles in size. But during that time, at the 30-minute mark and then again at the 60-minute mark, we will uncover it. And using some fingers we've dipped in water, we will go ahead and fold the dough by grabbing some from the outside and stretching it up over the top like this. And we'll go around and we'll do that like 5 or 6 times. After which we'll flip it over and then recover it and do the same thing 30 minutes later. And what we're doing here is developing more gluten structure, which as you'll see is going to help our rolls keep that nice round shape. So we'll do that folding twice, and then we'll just let it rise undisturbed for another hour, or until, like I said, it about doubles in size. At which point mine look like this. And if we poke it with our fingers, it will deflate and not just puff right back up. And once we're happy with that, we'll transfer it to our work surface. And we'll go ahead and simultaneously press that flat and squeeze out all the air. And then using our bench scraper, we will divide this into 6 equal portions, which we can just do by eye, or we can weigh it on a scale and divide by 6 and make exact portions. But either way, before we place these on a Silpat-lined baking sheet, we want to make sure we roll our ball of dough on the table like this, with our hand cupped over, since it's critical we get a perfectly round ball of dough with a perfectly smooth skin. And when we transfer these onto the pan, we'll give them a light pressing, but we will not flatten them out like we do for some sandwich rolls. I'm looking at you, burger bun. Right, these need to sit up high and perky. And then what we'll do next is dust a little bit of flour over the top, since we're going to want to cover these with a light kitchen towel, and this will help make sure it doesn't stick. And that's it, we'll go ahead and cover these up, and we'll let them rise, or proof as we call it in the business, for 30 minutes, during which time they're going to expand, and once you uncover them, they should look something like this. And that's it, these are now ready to transfer into the center of a 375-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. Oh, and by the way, that was a pan of water at the bottom of the oven I used for a different recipe. So ignore that, it doesn't matter. But anyway, we'll bake these for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until lightly golden brown and beautifully bulbous. And then what we'll do is transfer these to a cooling rack, since we need to let them cool down to room temp before we slice them. And because this perfectly round ball-like shape works best for the recipe, that's why we really do want to bake these ourselves. Since this particular shape can be very hard to find in a bakery or at the store. So as the old saying goes, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And while those are cooling, we can go ahead and mix up our sweet cream cheese filling, which starts by adding some white sugar to some room temperature cream cheese. And if a tablespoon seems like a lot, you have not seen the traditional method, which involves way more sugar. And not just sugar, often sweetened condensed milk, plus sometimes some honey. But I'm sorry, I just cannot have mine that sweet. So a tablespoon is plenty for me. And then we'll also need some salt, as well as some freshly ground black pepper, and of course a few shakes of cayenne. And then we'll finish this up with a whole bunch of freshly chopped Italian parsley, a generous amount of thinly sliced green onions, and then last but not least, a splash of cream. And that's it. We'll take a spatula and give this a good mix. And by the way, the green onions are one of my twists on this recipe, and I don't believe are included in the classic method. And besides adding a whole bunch of extra savoriness, plus natural sweetness to make up for the lack of sugar, but I think it also somehow makes our garlic taste more garlicky. And then once that's been mixed up, we'll go ahead and clean the spatula off with our finger, which once we're done is going to be a great way to sneak a taste, so we can make sure it's exactly how we want, which to me should be very savory and slightly sweet, but not over the top dessert sweet. And that's it. We can simply set that aside and move on to the last component, which is our garlic and butter mixture. And not just a little garlic, a ridiculous amount of garlic. All right, I'm using at least 8 or 9 minced cloves. And sure, if you want to use less, go ahead. I mean, you are, after all, the Roy Choi of how much garlic to deploy. But personally for me, you cannot use too much garlic here. And then besides the garlic, we'll also add a pinch of salt, a little bit of freshly chopped Italian parsley, and then, believe it or not, 1 whole egg. But don't be scared, it's going to be fine. And then all we need to do is give this a good mix with a whisk. And after about 20 to 30 seconds of mixing, we should be looking at what scientists call an emulsion, meaning the egg and butter are suspended together and not separate. And that's it. Once that's set, we can move into final production. And for that, we will place our rolls back on our Silpat line baking sheet. And then we'll take a serrated knife and make 3 cuts to divide this into 6 sections. And no, we're not cutting all the way down through, just about 90%. And the first cut's easy since we're just cutting it in half. But take your time on the second cut, since we want each half divided into thirds. And then our third cut should be pretty easy, since we'll slice right in the middle of that last section to, as I just mentioned, form 6 sections. And it's between each of these sections where we're going to pipe or spread our cream cheese mixture. But before we do, and I don't think this is traditional, but I like to dunk the cut roll into the garlic mixture first, and then I'll use my fingers to push that down inside. And yes, if you're a little less of a savage, you can use a brush or a knife or a spoon. But fingers work great. Plus, once I'm done, there's going to be a lot of pieces of garlic on the outside, which I'll use my fingers to push inside. So I went ahead and sliced and pre-garliced both rolls. At which point we'll take exactly 1/6 of our cream cheese mixture and spread that inside each roll between each section. And if I was doing all 6 or more, I probably would have transferred that into a piping bag and just squeezed that in between the sections, which would have been a little faster and neater. But since I'm just doing 2, I went ahead and used a knife, which is definitely messier, but works fine. And also, getting some on the outside is absolutely zero problem. Oh, and if you're wondering why I am just making 2, that's because these are so insanely delicious and incredibly addictive. You will eat 100% of the ones you make. So I decided to remove willpower from the equation. But anyway, once we have those filled with the right amount of cream cheese, and we've cleaned up the outside and pushed that inside the best we can, we will take these and dip them into our garlic butter mixture, making sure to apply a very generous thick coating, which, yes, is going to run down the sides a little bit, but that's okay, don't worry. And if we want, after those are dunked, we can take a spoon and kind of clean up around the base and transfer that back on top. But no matter what you do, some is still going to run off, which really is not a problem, since as you'll see, that's going to kind of caramelize and crisp up around the bottom. And eventually we will eat that as well. And then what we'll do before these go back in the oven, which by the way we've turned up to 425, but what we'll do is give these a nice dusting of freshly grated Parmesan cheese. Oh yeah, the real stuff, Parmigiano Reggiano, which considering all the other ingredients we've used here is the perfect final touch. And that's it, these are now ready to transfer into the center of a 425-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes, or until they are beautifully browned and look like this. Oh yeah. Even if you didn't know what this was, you would think, that is something I want to eat. And man, is it ever. Just as soon as it cools down a little bit, or at the very least cool enough to handle without burning yourself. And you can just let yours cool on the plate for a few minutes. All right, the only reason I'm going to transfer them onto this rack is because I thought they'd look a little better for my contractually obligated pictures. But anyway, we'll go ahead and let those cool for a couple minutes before we serve. And speaking of pictures, I went ahead and finished mine with a little pinch of parsley on the top. And that's it, we are ready to dig in. And by dig in, of course, I mean pull apart. since not only is the taste and texture amazing, but as an added bonus, these are fun to eat. And that, my friends, was just mind-blowingly delicious. In fact, you might even lose muscle control of your fingers. And for obvious reasons, what this tastes most like is garlic bread, but there is so much more going on. Since when you combine classic garlic bread flavor and texture with that warm, soft, rich cream cheese filling, the whole becomes way greater than the sum of the parts. And speaking of parts, don't forget those caramelized bits underneath. And as I already mentioned, the green onions in the filling are not typical, but I really do think they're a great addition. And they add a certain earthy sweetness that I think I find much more enjoyable than something like sweetened condensed milk, which again, if you watch some videos for quote-unquote authentic versions, is used in copious amounts. And I'm just not understanding why you would want it so sweet. But having said that, give it a try if you want. But I absolutely loved how this came out, and I cannot imagine having this sweeter making it any better. So that is just something about this I don't understand. But what I do understand is how this became so popular. Alright, above and beyond looking super cool and very enticing, it really is incredibly tasty, and as I've already mentioned, really addictive. But anyway, that's it. My take on Korean-style cream cheese garlic bread. Whether you do this with some beautiful homemade rolls, or just something decent you found at the store. Either way, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.